I think I wouldn't feel right if I didn't make a video about this, especially with what's been happening recently. So anyway, if you're looking for my normal studio content, I'm going to be making a normal studio episode after this. So you'll still see just normal percussion content from me, but I really have to talk about this with you guys. I wanted to first start by extending my condolences to the families of the 8 shooting victims in the Atlanta mass murder tragedy that was clearly racially motivated, and I'm really just heartbroken to see that this kind of thing is still happening in this day and age. It's just to know that there have been almost 4,000 hate crimes towards Asians in the last 12 months alone in the United States. And that's just reported hate crimes. That doesn't include any of the other acts that go unseen. That is crazy. And that, of course, doesn't include all the acts that happen in other countries too. Anyway, if you'd like to donate or show support for these families and for all of the victims that have been involved in these incidents, I've left some links in the description below. Now, one of my good friends, Trevino, has just written this blog post that I think is really important. It's about racism in the classical music world, in the greater arts community as well. You can check it out in the description below. It's wonderful the way he has articulated it, especially for someone who is as important as he is in our percussion community. It's just really nice to hear these words from him. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you so much for doing that. And I think this blog post, in addition to other people who've been bravely sharing their experiences online, I feel like if I didn't do it, I wouldn't be true to myself. I've been wanting to make this video for a very long time, but I've just been afraid of people saying I'm using the race card or victimization or all kinds of things. So before I get into this video though, I just want to point out 3 things. The first thing is I'm not looking to cancel people. I'm going to be censoring all names. I'm not going to mention anybody's names, even the people who perpetuated these experiences. And if those people are watching this video, I hope that you will feel some responsibility. I hope that you maybe understand that what you do in these situations is not right, and you will learn from it. I think that's the most important thing is, you know, people make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. I make mistakes too. Secondly, these experiences are my own, and as a result, I don't feel like I represent all Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So I feel like if you have any experiences, please share them, whether you want to share them in my comment section or just make your own video talking about these issues. I think that would be really great because it just needs to be spoken about more. And thirdly, I'm not making this video because I want to be treated better than white people, or I want to have a handout, or I just want to be viewed in this light as some sort of hero. I just think it's really important to draw the attention of systemic racism. And when you think about it, this channel that I've made and all the things that you know me for, I've never once referred to my ethnicity. I've never once referred to my race or my upbringing as the reason why you should subscribe to me, as the reason why you should follow my content. Like me being an Asian Australian, that is what I am. And I earned my master's degree, I earned my work experience, all by doing exactly the same thing that my white colleagues did, which was just working hard. But this is the thing, right? Systemic racism. BIPOC always have to work much harder than white people to get the same results. And I'm going to talk about this later on when I describe my experiences. But yeah, to all of the people who are watching this who are white, especially my friends who know me personally, I don't hate you at all, of course. And I'm not using this as a video to attack anybody, but rather I just hope if you were involved in the experiences that I was in, or if you've just known me for a long time, you'll just be more aware of these things. And I think that is the most I could ask for at this point. Okay, so going back to what made me ultimately want to make this video, it's actually, it sounds really silly, but it was a Facebook comment on a post, a really good post, which was in a marimba group, and it was about uplifting AAPI voices, Asian American Pacific Islander, Asian voices, uplifting them and showcasing, you know, how are ways to support people during this very difficult time. And this is the post. It's an infographic by Southern California Marimba saying that they stand in solidarity and they offer their condolences. And I think it's just a really positive post. And in a perfect demonstration of how these issues still exist, in response to that infographic is this comment. And I've blurred out the names because, like I said, I don't want to cancel anybody. I don't want to attack anyone, even though this is a public post in a public forum. But this person said, there's just so many things wrong with this comment. The first sentence says, unfortunately, this post came up in my feed. I had the further misfortune of reading the whole post. What exactly is bad about this post? It's just saying that we should uplift the voices of minorities. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. The second sentence, firstly, person A and person B aren't remotely racist. Okay, so for context, person A said something about one of the things that were mentioned in the original post and was questioning its integrity. He said something like, are you sure this is a real thing? I know this person and this person is not racist. And again, nobody was attacked in the original post, so I don't think it's relevant to say this. There's no need to defend people for not being racist instead of looking at the actual issue, right? You should be ashamed of yourselves for ever making such assertions. See, when people say this, especially when white people say sentences like this, it makes people feel very afraid to voice their concerns. They feel like invalidated. So if anybody has concerns, you're basically just saying, well, too bad, you're not allowed to have concerns. Like, come on, man, that's just, no. It seems to me that most of the young people making these comments are simply frustrated young people with too much time on their hands. So what if you're experiencing racial-based injustice and you're being treated unfairly, you just have too much time on your hands. You're just frustrated. No, there's no problem, you're just frustrated. Like, that's, no. I'm sorry you've had to endure the pandemic. It's been a tough year for everyone. Again, this was not mentioned in the original post. But the thing that got me the most about this comment is this sentence here. And I got so frustrated when I read this. And I'm going to read it out to you. I don't think the marimba community is a community to search for significant racial and ethnic bias. It's just not there. You're tilting at windmills. Are you serious right now? You're literally going to tell people, as a white person, you're going to tell people there are no problems in the percussion community. There is no such thing as racial discrimination. You're completely making this up. It's just not there. Well, I guess if you say it's not there, that means it's not there, right? Problem solved. Just because you say something doesn't exist doesn't magically make it disappear. So yeah, I don't want to give that person any more screen time, and I don't want anybody to attack him either. He's entitled to his opinion, as wrong as it is, and I just hope that maybe after reading some of the things people said to him, and maybe even if he watches this video, he will just think twice about making blanket statements like that. So I was born in Australia and I grew up here. I went to school here, I went to university here, and it's definitely my favorite country in the world. I wouldn't call any other place home. So when I refer to Australia, don't think that I don't like living here. I think it's a really wonderful place. One of the things that I noted about living in Australia is, of course, it's a predominantly white country. And when I was growing up, I was subject to all of the usual cavalcade of comments like, oh, you have small eyes. So you're from Australia, but where are you really from? Happy birthday, I hope you got to eat lots of dumplings. So this is your recital, right? How many of your people are coming? And yeah, you know, like sometimes when I speak my languages, I can speak Mandarin, I can speak Cantonese. These are Chinese languages, and people would say things like, oh, ching chong ling long, that's what it all sounds like, ching chong, it all sounds the same. And during the start of the pandemic, I was wearing a mask when there was no legal requirement to wear one here. And people would approach me in the street and say, go back to China, why are you wearing that mask? Go back to China, where you came from. Generally speaking, Australia can be a pretty tolerant society, but these things still do happen. And one of the worst things that happened was when I was still in primary school. There was this incident. I'll have a news article to it in the description below, or you can check out my blog post. There was this neo-Nazi supremacist group based right here in the city that I live in. They would spray swastikas on every Chinese restaurant. Literal huge swastikas, and they would write things like gooks, go and die. They also hated people who were Jewish, so they would write things like Jews, go die, gooks, go die. And one of the things this person did with his group is they actually went around firebombing Chinese restaurants. They firebombed 3 restaurants. Those restaurants no longer exist now. And I don't know if you can imagine this, but there was just so much fear at the time amongst me and my Asian friends. The media wasn't really talking about it very much either. And I still remember that this person also used to send death threats by mail to a whole bunch of Asian people in Perth, and we had to just put up with it. And I was so afraid of leaving the house for so many years. But yeah, obviously 20 odd years have passed since then, and I still think about it all the time. But it's nice to know that I guess in Australia, things have improved significantly, and we see less of that tangible racist act where people are like bombing restaurants. But here's the thing, you don't necessarily have to be like this person and his neo-Nazi group, bombing restaurants and painting swastikas on the wall to be contributing to white supremacy, to be contributing to racism. I'm gonna start by listing some examples in Australia of percussion-related things that I think are contributing to systemic racism, whether intentionally or unintentionally, it doesn't really matter, it's happening. First one is all Australian percussion events, workshop days, festivals, competitions, pretty much all of them have either all white male lineups or all white lineups, or majority white lineups. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, Adam, well, maybe they couldn't find someone to put in the lineup. It just so happens that every percussionist is white. Well, that's another problem in itself, but let me tell you this. I can actually list so many people they could have put in these events in each state that could have done it that is not white, that would have been just as qualified or even more qualified than these people. And the problem is a lot of people will say, oh, well, what's the problem with having an all-white lineup? I mean, they're all really nice people. And yeah, a lot of the time they are nice people. They're not racists. They're not trying to be offensive, but it just means that if you're a percussionist, a young percussionist who is not white, BIPOC, and you're looking to be a percussionist in the future, who can you look up to? Literally, like if you're looking at the events, you're looking at the people who run the universities and they're all white. How could you, with a straight face, say, maybe that will be me one day? I'll give you another example. There was this event that happened a couple of years ago, around the same time as my festival, Marimba Fest, and it was called a Gender Diversity in Music event. Gender diversity in music, and it was talking about diversity in the arts in general. And they had all of these tags and slogans saying that it was a diversity-focused event. Yet, the entire key artists lineup and the majority of the keynote speakers were white and came from privileged backgrounds. And I was like, you cannot make this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up. How can you say you stand for diversity yet have a fully white privileged lineup? How can you do that? Especially if you're going to use the term diversity in your event so vividly and make it sound like you're doing a great thing, but you're not actually doing it. It reminds me of this post from Oberlin Conservatory. This diversity event was given all of the funding and was given priority to all of the rooms, and it was basically treated as like the main stage event of the year. Maybe don't call your event a diversity event if you're not planning to follow through with it anyway. And this is before you even consider in the percussion world in Australia, all the leadership positions, whether it's orchestral positions, whether it's academic positions like heads of percussion, heads of departments, or even just the percussion lecturers, they are pretty much all white. I'm struggling to name more than 2 Asian percussionists who work at a university in Australia, which is quite shocking when you think about it. Even in my own hometown, my percussion department that I work in right now, as well, I don't even know what my position is because I don't actually have a percussion faculty position, yet I have to be involved in so much of the work. Having me as a percussion faculty person would upset the other percussion faculty members who are, of course, all white males. Like it's so obvious. It's so obvious. Okay, if that doesn't sound like systemic racism, how about this? I have lost so many valuable positions, valuable opportunities, valuable performance gigs to my white colleagues who are less qualified than me or have less experience than me or both. So many times. It has happened so many times. And it's always so blatantly obvious, yet everybody always has an excuse for it. I asked someone about this once. I said, why is this happening? Why am I not being chosen even though I have more qualifications and more experience? And the answer was, oh, that person is more charismatic than you. Right, more charismatic. The amount of excuses that people come up with is ridiculous. I can also talk about the amount of times that I've performed with white colleagues. And this will be in like performances, in events like gigs or anything like that. The white colleague always gets praise lavished onto them. It doesn't matter how well I play. It doesn't matter how important my part is. It doesn't matter if I'm playing 90% of the repertoire. I do not get any acknowledgement. Like it would happen so many times, the audience member would come up and they would say, oh, well done to the white person. And then to me, they would just be like, oh, it's nice meeting you. And this happened once too when I was playing with this quartet. And they were all white people, but that wasn't an issue to me. I was just playing with them as a guest artist. And then I remember the audience comes up afterwards and says, oh, congratulations, congratulations. And none of them congratulated me. It was like I didn't exist. I basically just said my goodbyes and went home after that. And at this point of my performing career, I'm pretty used to being treated like this, but it doesn't make me any less upset. Like I just feel so empty when that happens. To clearly see my white colleague next to me getting praise lavished onto them and I don't get anything. And it carries on to the next day too. Like I'll see that same white colleague will be in like a magazine feature, they'll be interviewed multiple times, they'll have heaps of photos of them and there'll be like one tiny photo of me in the corner. And this runs too with my events. Firstly, like grant applications. I've always not been a fan of grant applications because I know there's always going to be some bias there. But we wanted to run Marimba Fest for the second year. This was before we knew COVID was going to happen. And I was going to apply for a few grants because we didn't have enough money to make up the shortfall. And I noticed that a lot of people who applied in the same grant round, they got heaps of money and they were white percussion artists and they were just doing concerts for themselves. They were just doing little bits of concerts here and there, and they would get huge sums of money, like $10,000, $15,000. I applied 4 times and I got rejected every single time. 3 times was to one grant body, the 4th time was to another grant body. And all of them said the same thing. They said, we don't need to have this event. We don't need to have an event where you bring in people from overseas because it's just not necessary. Why can't they just bring people from local? And I was just like, well, isn't that the point of these events? Shouldn't you be bringing something new? Meanwhile, the white colleague that I was mentioning earlier that managed to get the $15,000 grant was doing a tour with all white people, and it's all people that you would see regularly in the concerts. She got the grant pretty much on the first go. And then here's another thing, the term Australian, and this applies to people in the US too, when they use the term American, and you ask, what is American exactly? What is Australian? Well, I always think if you use the term Australian, it's someone who lives in Australia, someone who has lived a lot of their life in Australia, someone who was born in Australia. I think that qualifies you to be Australian. But the thing is, whenever percussion institutions here in Australia run those Australian music concerts for percussion, so they go and showcase Australian composers. Some of them will be modern composers, like people who have just exited uni. Some of them will be composers like your Nigel Westlakes and your Peter Sculthorpes, right? I have never once been referred to as an Australian composer. My music has never been referred to as Australian music, and I have never featured on any Australian repertoire list. Now, think about this. My music, and I'd also like to point out one of my friends, Robert Utomo. He is also Australian, even though he is of Indonesian descent, he is Australian too. Our music has never featured in any of these Australian contexts, even though we are as Australian as the people who are in these Australian concerts. Our works feature on global repertoire lists around the world. I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I will say that Robert and I have written a lot of works that are really popular right now in percussion, and they have always been shunned by all the Australian educators, which I think is hilarious. We have never featured in any Australian examination repertoire list. When I look at these repertoire lists in Australia, it's always all white composers. And I'm just like, what? So yeah, I could go on about this forever, but I don't want to sound like a broken record. I have made a blog post about this in the description below and in the pinned comment down below, which is basically everything I've said in this video, but in text form. And if you're someone in the percussion world who has felt oppressed because of not only their race, but maybe their gender or their orientation or religion or anything at all, I encourage you to speak up about it. I encourage you to write about it or make a video about it, just so people know that the percussion world isn't all roses and blooming trees. Like, honestly, I think it's pretty obvious that it's not the case, but this person thought otherwise and a lot of people agreed with them, so I was a little bit like, oh. But anyway, so hopefully after this video you will see that yes, systemic racism is a very real thing in the percussion world. If you still don't believe it's a real thing, I'm sorry, we're just gonna have to disagree. If you want to create positive change in the percussion community, there are so many things you can do. You can start small, like go to your BIPOC friends' recitals, support them whenever they're in need of something, play music written by BIPOC composers, support the causes financially if you'd like to, if you have the capacity to. And yeah, even just saying that you show support and showing solidarity means a lot to people. Like Ivan's blog post really just meant so much to me this morning. And other things you can do. If someone is identified as the perpetrator of some sort of injustice, like systemic racism or something, don't jump to things like, oh, but this person's not racist. Oh, but I know this person is a nice person. Like, even nice people can make mistakes too. And even nice people say things and maybe they don't mean it, but it comes across in a bad way. It doesn't matter. You have to be responsible for your actions. And it's okay to just take that and just apologize. Like, I've made mistakes before, as I've said. And even people who are on the BIPOC side are not perfect, okay? Like, nobody should ever consider themselves perfect. We are humans, we make mistakes. It's okay. And yeah, it's not really that difficult. Just be kind to one another. And like I said, if you're any of the people that you think I'm mentioning in my experiences, just have a think about what your actions might do for people other than yourself. Okay. I think that's enough talking for this video, but thank you for listening to me. It's really a great load off my chest to be able to make this video. And if you want to check out any of the resources or anything I mentioned, it's all in the description below. Thanks for watching again, and I'll see you guys soon in a regular episode of The Studio.